Well, that's a good start. I think we started with the wrong theme tune. How's that?
Yeah.
First time we do Partners in Crime live in front of a studio audience, and there we are. Before I've even started, the mistake was mine.
We get the 12-inch remix.
Yeah. You may have noticed, regular listeners to the podcast, that we have a different voice here today. We have the voice of Mr. Adrian Hobart.
Hi. Lovely to be here, and a great honour, and a very last-minute one too.
A very last-minute one, yes. Mr. Dawes unfortunately had a bit of an emergency and couldn't make it today, but it's good to have you with us, Adrian.
It's just an enormous honour. I was just emailing my parents and saying, you'll never guess what, because they listen to the Partners in Crime podcast, and they said, well, when are you going to get on it? You narrate some of Adam's books. You know, but here I am, so co-pres is, as we say in the business, is fantastic.
Well, we are live at the Morecambe Vice Crime Writing Festival here in the wonderful Morecambe Bay. I'm looking out now into what was the sea about half an hour ago, and I now got no idea where it's gone. Someone seems to have taken it away. It's a very fast receding tide here. So thank you to the guys at Morecambe and Vice for hosting us. This is the first time we've done the podcast in front of a studio audience, so it is a little bit daunting. We are recording at the beautiful Art Deco Midland Hotel right here on the seafront, where legend has it, I'm too young to know, but episodes of Poirot were filmed.
So I'm certainly in the zone for having watched some Poirot with Suchet and all that sort of thing. Yes, they were filmed here. Also on the south coast, anyone knows Saltdean and Rottingdean, places like that. Loads of Art Deco masterpieces down there. So I was in the background of one shot, I think, when I was a reporter down there. Wow. They had to call, cut and get me out of it, but I never made it to screen.
You in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you are a bit of a crime fiction aficionado. We do sometimes chat about crime, amongst other stuff.
Yes.
You were mentioning when we had a little chat in the bar last night when I press ganged Adrian into doing this, and you mentioned you've been watching some what I would call classic crime dramas on TV.
Contemporary for some of us. Bergerac. Don't you just love Bergerac, where you know who the villain is when Charlie Hungerford introduces him at a garden party? All right, Jim, what's brought you here? Well, I'm after the guy who just introduced as Mr. Khawaja from out Saudi Arabia.
It's a bit like Midsummer Murders.
Yeah, it was.
Well, look at the biggest celebrity. They're the one that's going to have done it.
It wasn't really a stretch for John Nettles, was it, to switch between? But he did less running in Midsummer Murders.
Yes.
and didn't have as neat a car. But apart from that,
there is that. And what have you been reading lately when you've not been watching Bergerac?
Okay, tongue in cheek here. Shameless plug. I have been reading your book, Adam.
Oh, what do you know?
Dead and Buried, available at the back. No, the reason I say that is that I'm the narrator on this one, so this is actually a project that finishes on Monday, when I've done a few little technical tweaks to improve things. You are literally the last person I've read. And actually, when you're narrating and getting projects, there isn't a lot of time for leisure reading anymore, because you're always reading the next book ahead to make sure that you're ready for the characters you need, for the voices. Dare I say it, the Middle Eastern accents, which I've just had to do for a Roman legionary story. And the danger is, of course, when you do those sort of accents, that you're drifting into pastiche, or you might offend people, but ultimately it's about conveying the story. So, yeah, I've been DCI Culverhouse for a few weeks, which is great fun. And you used to do those books, and now I've taken over. So there's going to be a bit of a contrast in style, I think.
Yeah, they're about to get a lot better.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. Well, I slip into this voice. Think of Ray Winston trying to solve a crime, so DCI Culverhouse is, what do you mean? That kind of thing. You slag. Not that you've ever written that, but that's always my trigger phrase if I need to get back into voice.
He's not normally that polite.
No, that's for sure.
Dead and Buried is available at the Festival Bookshop for anybody who wants to buy it. Buy it.
Or else.
I have, as I am wont to do on the podcast, been looking at some of the crime fiction news stories in the news this week, and one that I spotted was an interesting one. We had a little chat about this earlier, actually. It was in The Guardian, an article by Ben Quinn, with the headline, Met Chief Outraged at Line of Duty Over Corruption Portrayal. The Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, apparently doesn't like Line of Duty. And what was most amazing, I found, is she'd never actually heard of it until she sat down at dinner next to Vicky McClure and said, "So what do you do?"
I bang people like you up, in drama, yes.
The highest ranking police officer in Britain had never heard of Line of Duty.
Well, you do get the impression, look, I mean, I used to be a news journalist before I became a sports one, and pretty much everybody you meet in public life is just a little bit distant from the reality of things. They're folks, I imagine Cressida Dick is extremely busy and doesn't have time for this sort of thing. But yeah, it is a bit worrying, isn't it, when you hear the higher echelons aren't sort of following how the police are going to be perceived through drama.
Well, this is something that she commented on, actually. She said she was distinctly unimpressed with its portrayal of corruption. She said she was absolutely outraged by the level of casual and extreme corruption that was being portrayed as the way the police is in 2018-19. It is far from that, she said. She accepted the programme was good drama, so there is something in it.
Yeah.
But apparently she was even more outraged by Bodyguard, which was written by Jed Mercurio as well. She said, it drove everybody round here absolutely up the wall. I actually did have to switch it off after about 20 minutes. The moment when the Home Secretary made a pass at the protection officer was just beyond me, I'm afraid.
certainly beyond the current Home Secretary, I thought.
Who is it this week?
Yeah, exactly.
Helen King, who was formerly Assistant Commissioner at the Met, said casual corruption and casual disregard of police procedures and the law is not a part of modern-day UK policing, let alone part of police corruption investigations. And she added, of course, dramas have to take liberties to keep viewers hooked, but it does worry me a bit that viewers may unconsciously assume that this is the reality. I mean, just let's not have a show of hands, because that doesn't tend to work on audio. How many of you think Line of Duty is real? If you do, shout now. Who thinks Line of Duty is just good fun? Right, good. That's that one.
Ted Hastings is going to be relaxed now.
Yeah, that's that one settled then, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was my first news item. I am shuffling paper awkwardly now to move on to my number 2.
Yes.
I'll rephrase that. To move on to the second news item I saw this week, which was an article on newsroom.co.nz.
A fine establishment. Yeah.
I read it every day.
Yes.
A New Zealand news website where Craig Sisterson, who's a friend of the podcast, he's been on Partners in Crime before, and founder of the Niall Marsh Crime Writing Awards, wrote an article with the headline, "Does Crime Fiction Delight in the Brutal Killing of Women?" Now, this is something that's popped up in the news a few times recently. We discussed it on previous episodes, where there's a lot of discussion over whether we glorify violence against women in crime. I mean, some of the statistics, for example, most murder victims are men, but most crime readers are female. So it's an interesting discussion. There was a prize launched recently called the Staunch Prize, which was set up to celebrate books where no women were hurt or put in peril, as it says here, in any way whatsoever.
Right. How do you qualify that?
This is the interesting thing. It did cause quite a lot of discussion in the crime fiction community. Craig Sisterson seems to still be kind of on the fence in this. Val McDermid, interestingly, responded to the Staunch Prize, saying, "So what? We're not going to talk about violence against women or write about it, and it will all just go away. History has shown us that if we ignore something and pretend it's not happening, it'll stop. No, that's not what history tells us." Staunch Prize organisers weren't too happy with that and kind of doubled down on their views and their stance on it. So it's an interesting...
And there were some rules that came out of this? Or?
Yes.
So I'm sitting down to my next crime novel, or my first in my case, and I'm sitting there and I've got to stick to some rules that have been basically put together by the community, certain parts of the community.
Apparently so, yes.
Right, so what would they be?
Well, some of the more... anyone here who's very familiar with the golden age of detective fiction might know that some rules were put together, I think, in the 1920s by somebody, I can't remember, it might have been Wilkie Collins or somebody, who suggested things that you should and shouldn't do when you're writing detective fiction. There were things like introduce the killer early. You can't just have it was God or something like that. It can't be the narrator who was the killer, which of course has been blown out of the water many times since. Interestingly, no Chinaman, I think, was a rule.
Yeah.
It was the
Post-Brexit, that's going to be...
It was the 1920s. And Liam McIlvenney has come up with some rules of thumb on a blog that his creative writing class came up with for treating violence against women with due sensitivity in crime fiction.
Have a look.
You can, yes.
Yeah, okay, so...
Got your glasses on?
No, I actually haven't.
Mine.
Because we've got so many headphones on, I can't wear them. Yeah, you better have, because mine are shonky. It's blur.
He suggests avoid titillation in sexual violence and have violence off stage where appropriate. A bit like when I punched you in the face over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it warmed me up, didn't it?
Deal with consequences for victims and investigators. Include female characters beyond the victim. Try to suggest the victim's depth of character and something of their life beyond being a victim, allowing readers to hear their voice if possible. Show victims with agency and strength, not just sacrificial lambs for the plot. And, one of my favourite sentences of all time, consign virgin-whore dichotomy to the lowest pit of hell.
T-shirts with that on are available at the back. Sizes up to XXL.
Well, I think that's a great name for a prog rock band, Virgin Whore Dichotomy. I would love it. But Craig closes his article in saying the harsh truth is that our world has a problem with misogyny and violence against women. Perhaps crime fiction, by reflecting the society within which it occurs, merely explores and emphasises the very real fears many women all over the world have, readers and writers included, regardless of homicide statistics.
Okay, well, I've got two things to say on this. First of all, crime fiction needs a bit of fear. So why can you... I mean, it's difficult to imagine, taking that element out. So threat is at the core of everything in crime. Obviously, there's the clues and there's all of that stuff. But, we're talking about a genre which deals in taking you to a place where you don't really want to be, but you're getting a visceral thrill sometimes from it. So there's an element there. And the other thing I would say is that in my early career, when I first became a journalist in 95, I was working for...
1895.
No, feels like it. 1995, I was in a radio station near Swindon in Wootton Bassett, now Royal Wootton Bassett, and GWR was what it was called at the time. And they had a style guide on the wall. Most places, in the place I work now, we have a style guide. I wrote it, basically. So, but this one was great. It was about how you should describe accidents. So if it involved a vehicle, it was a horrific smash, horror smash. If someone died, it was a horror death smash. If the fire brigade attended, it was a fireball horror death smash. And
that's another prog rock band name, then.
Yeah, if a child was involved, it was a tragic fireball horror death smash. And if an animal was involved, it was a tragic fireball horror death smash that needn't have happened. And the other thing you had to do was do it in that way you did in the 90s on local radio, and you had to speak through your nose. A fireball horror death smash is being investigated, that kind of thing. That was essential. You had to sort of just go a bit nasal.
We talk about how media influences the way we think about things, and I think there's a grain of truth in that, because that's reminded me of a psychological experiment that was done. I can't remember the details of it. It's literally just jogged that in my mind just now, where subjects were shown videos of cars colliding.
Yeah.
They were shown the same videos, and one group were asked how fast were the cars going when they collided. One group was asked how fast do you think the cars are going when they smashed, when they bumped, different words with different levels of severity. And the speeds that the subjects estimated rose as the tone of the language did. So even though it was exactly the same video, they were estimating them at like 25, 30 miles an hour when they said collided. When they said smashed, they were estimating 60, 70 miles an hour being speeds. And massive variations just because of the language that's used, and your perception of things changes.
Which takes us into a debate which has been raging through Parliament.
It does. Let's not go there. Right, we had another little idea, didn't we, for something we were going to do, which is going to be a little bit fun. We thought this up about an hour ago.
We're that prepped,
Where's Tom, our man with the mic? Is he...
I'm here. Sorry, I'm here. How can I help?
Tom, we've got a game we want to play with the audience.
Oh, so you were putting me then for a second?
No, that's for the after-show party. Is anybody familiar with a parlour game where you make up a story one word at a time?
Oh, there's hearts sinking out there.
We're going to do this with you.
No. Your anonymity is protected. It won't be, we won't be naming you all individually on air.
So we want you to, I think, probably pass this microphone around. We want each member of the audience, in turn, to say a word and to build a little mini crime fiction story live here on Partners in Crime. You up for this?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's that
Now
time of
remember,
the
there are children in the audience. So we'll...
I think if we go maybe along the front in this direction and then go back and along, and if we just kind of snake up to the back there. If you want to start it off, Tom, that'd be lovely. If you want to do the first word, anything that jumps into your mind, don't make it zebra or something.
Shall I write it down as we go so that we can repeat it afterwards? We can perhaps narrate it back.
It's being recorded, but feel free if it keeps you quiet.
Yeah, well.
Okay, so I'm going to start off really simple and go with the.
Dead.
Go on, hurry up.
Man. Smiled.
The end.
A grimace. Fit.
Pass the bug.
Gruesome.
Scene. Underwater. Bad. The mermaid. Drink. Over. Everywhere. Without saying a loosh.
Like
Meanwhile,
Art.
gathered.
Near.
The lights went out.
Yeah, loose, loose understanding of what a word is. But yeah.
Unfortunately,
In the dark room.
Are you related?
She.
cried. Then died. Paul. Then appeared.
Why?
He ran
Dangerously.
towards the
I wish we hadn't sold so many tickets now.
Oncoming.
Ambulance.
going very fast into the car park barrier. And the other.
We're going to need to solve this very quickly. It's about 3 rows back.
However, when
The dog.
parked
The paramedic drove away.
Saying
Notwithstanding.
Oh, make play for a winner.
I'm back in the golden age.
No Chinaman, please.
Immense.
Proceeded.
Towards. The.
Tragedy.
The end.
I would love to read that back, but I lost about 8 or 9 words, which are probably crucial.
We are
for the-
recording it. We'll be okay.
Good.
We are okay. Yeah, that's about the speed you read at when you do my audio books.
That is. Yeah.
He does get paid by the hour, that's why.
Absolutely.
We had a bit of a thing in recent weeks on the podcast mentioning that every newspaper, every website under the sun has lists of books that they suggest we read. For whatever reason, their top 10 summer reads. The Eye is no different. Sarah Hughes in The Eye this week gave us her list of publishers that have been telling her she has to promote their books. She suggested Attica Locke's Heaven My Home for anyone looking for a cracking piece of intelligent, hard-hitting crime fiction. T. Christian Miller and Ken Armstrong's Unbelievable for those wanting to know the true story behind the Netflix drama. Jane Casey's Cruel Acts for anyone looking for a smart, long-running procedural series to get stuck into. Anne Bilson's The Half Man for some pulp fiction. Laura Purcell's Bone China for a Daphne du Maurier slice of suspense, apparently. Finer Things by David Wharton for readers looking for an atmospheric period story. The Wayward Girls by Amanda Mason for those who like a supernatural element in their crime. The Lying Room by Nikki French for those wanting a superior psychological thriller. Now You See Them by Ellie Griffiths, another fan of the show, a friend of the show. I don't think she's a fan, but why would she be?
Well, yeah, quite. Especially after this one.
Fans of great characterisation and even better sleight of hand. This Little Dark Place by A.S. Hatch for fans of Pitch Perfect Noir. Try saying that after a few gin and tonics. Impossible Causes by Julie Mayhew for those looking for something a little different. Michael Connolly's The Night Fire for those looking for the next blockbuster crime read of the autumn. Violet by S.J.I. Holiday for anyone who loves Patricia Highsmith, in which case just read Patricia Highsmith. Nothing Important Happened Today by Will Carver for readers who want a truly unusual crime fiction experience. It's one of those words, isn't it? Like when estate agents call places cosy.
Atmospheric.
Yes, different.
Yeah. Mould up the walls. Yeah.
And for completists everywhere, the great Barry Forshaw's Crime Fiction, A Reader's Guide. Nathan Blackwell's The Sound of Her Voice for fans of crime from down under. And for those who love a good memoir, Lucy Mallison's 3 a Penny. They were the recommendations from Sarah Hughes in The Eye. If you want to listen
I
to
hate
that.
to be cynical about these things, but do you know what? That just sounds like the slush pile that arrived on their desk, and they've literally taken a scan of each image and then taken the one line out of the blurb and stuck it in there.
They were the publishers who paid the most.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry, yeah. But we're indie kind of guys, so we're kind of a bit cynical about the real publishing world, or the trad publishing world, but, I've done these sort of things where, you're thinking, I forgot to get the products in, and you knock it up, and I hate to sort of open the door on journalistic practices, but you can imagine it. Sometimes it's like an essay crisis. You scramble it together, somehow it looks all right. People say it's great, but actually there's not a lot of insight.
No. Well, there we go. No comment. I want to open this to the floor as well and find out what you've been reading recently, what you would recommend. I can see a couple of authors in the audience as well, so no cheating and recommending your own books. That goes for you, Mr. Brolly, at the back. So has anybody got any books they've read recently and really highly recommend, or TV series, films, anything crimey on some level? I imagine some of you will have read some crime recently, or frankly, you're in the wrong place.
Right at the front just here.
M.W. Craven's The Puppet Show.
Tell us about it.
He is...
We've got 15 minutes to waste.
Okay, he's a Carlisle writer, and this is his second series, but with a new publisher, and he is going stratospheric with this. Look out for it on TV, go and buy it, it's a fabulous book.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Here we've got quite a few.
Martin Edwards' Second in Wood. It's the fifth book in the series, set in Kendal, and the Lake District area. Coming from there, he gets it so right. You can walk to places using his books as your directions.
Wow.
That's how much he's done his research. So you can only look at the rest of it and wonder how accurate it is. But he's just a fabulous writer.
So is Wayne Bright's publisher worried now?
I don't know about that, but...
And what is it here?
I've been going a little bit retro recently, rereading some books, and mine is Carlo Lucarelli's Almost Blue, where you've got a serial killer on the loose in Rome, and the only witness is a blind man. And he hears people through colour. So it's a fascinating read, absolutely beautiful book as well.
That sounds good. I do like a bit of Italian crime fiction. No, seriously, I have spoken on this podcast before about my love of Montalbano.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Well, there we are. Yes. The unfortunately recently deceased, not Montalbano, because he's not a real person.
Identity Crisis by Ben Elton, which features murders. It's a detective, but everything's getting messed up with identity politics and social media outrage.
A little bit of politics, as it used to say.
That reminds me, actually, I was at a talk here last night after I got in, and there was a reading from a book which, as you can see, I've bought pretty much every book I've come across so far, so I've got a big pile here. But one of the ones that really appealed to me, and somebody who I wanted to get on the show today, unfortunately he's had to get on the train back down to London, is Paul Burston. With this book, The Closer I Get, and we do this on the podcast sometimes, because you can't see the book, I mean you can, but anybody listening to this afterwards can't, so for the benefit of them...
It's a 3-second spin.
Sounds lovely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He opened his talk before he read from this, telling us how he'd had somebody who'd started talking to him on social media, on Twitter, then developed into a troll, and then became a real-life stalker. And after about 6 months, he started to realise actually this was getting dangerous and he needed to go to the police. And he did, and it was a woman, and she was convicted and given a restraining order. And later did the same to other authors and was given another restraining order, even though she was told she'd be going to prison if she did it again. But he wrote a book based on his experience. He said it's not autobiographical, it's not a memoir as such, but it is based on what happened to him. It gave him the spark for this book. It's written in 2 viewpoints, bounces back and forth with essentially the 2 main characters, the writer and the stalker, talking to each other through the book. I can't say much more about it because I haven't read it. I only heard 1 chapter last night, but it does sound brilliant. That's The Closer I Get by Paul Burston. I think there are copies available in the festival bookshop if you want to go and get some of those.
We've had the thumbs up, yes there are.
We have, excellent. Anybody else read anything that they think we should buy?
We've got another recommendation. We've got plenty of recommendations.
Cool. We've got about 10 minutes. Let's just fill it with that. It saves me doing any work.
I recommend Robert Dosdick, The Killing Rock.
Yes.
This is 3rd book in the series, and it's got a nice mix of Gibraltar and crime mixed in, and I know that they're also available in the bookshop.
Yeah, and not out yet either. They're not out yet. They're pre-publication copies, so you get your hands on that. I think some of them are even signed.
Tell Me Your Secret by Dorothy Coulson, a fantastic read about a serial killer. She really gets to the heart of it, and her language and descriptions are absolutely second to none, as well as her storytelling. She's a fantastic writer.
Brilliant. Any more for any more?
Over here.
The Devil Aspect by Craig Russell. It's set in 1930s Czechoslovakia, and there's a serial killer target in Prague, and a young psychologist has just taken up post at a castle which houses 6 inmates who are the worst of the worst serial killers.
That sounds interesting. This is kind of in your neck of the woods.
Yeah,
you're a bit of a history buff, and the series you're writing is kind of...
Yes, the series I'm aiming to get out to the world early next year. is based around. Starts in 1940, and it's a series of thrillers with a twist of romance in it, I guess. Little dash of that. Quite humorous in places, but dark in others. About one of these Chinese Wonders spies who were employed basically where they went to school. They played rugby well, that kind of stuff, from privileged backgrounds. And then so that's my character Rafe, who gets himself in scrapes and eventually matures at some point in the series, and his on-off partner Violette, who is a much more sensible, certainly the intelligent part of the partnership, and the scrapes they get into both in the UK and in occupied Europe. So it's, I'm looking to write 5 books in that series before we bring Rafe to the 21st century, which is what I'm really looking forward to doing. A guy with all of his attitudes running into 21st century mores, and
he'll be quite old by then, wouldn't he?
He would be, but I'll explain all in that when that book comes out. You have to wait for it.
Is it going down time travel?
No, we are going down time travel. I'm sorry. Yeah, we have to have a MacGuffin to get him into the 21st century. But it's fun, like taking him to a pub where he can't smoke and seeing what happens. Stuff like that.
Will he get kicked out?
Yeah, well, he would. But there's a whole load of stuff like that.
So between writing and recording audiobooks, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but which do you prefer to spend your time doing? Or maybe I don't.
No, well, look, I don't know, actually. I mean, I'm sort of writing, when it flows, it's the most wonderful. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you in the room will know this. When you get a morning where it just comes together and you feel it just... You're not even really conscious of what you're doing, it just comes. That is the best feeling in the world. That doesn't happen in audiobooks, believe me. It's a battle against getting tongue twisters, getting stuck on a sentence. You might have to repeat 8 or 9 times before you get it right, even if you prep the book really well. Then you find a character that you can't remember. You recorded them 2 weeks before and you can't remember what they sound like and where you put your tongue in your mouth to create the shape that created that Geordie accent or whatever it might be. All those sort of things really trip you up. So I would say for pleasure, when writing goes well, that's great. When you can't find a word and you sit there all day on a blank screen, that's terrible. So the lows are lower, the highs are much higher than audiobooks. Audiobooks is a marathon. It's a attritional operation. I mean, it's great when you get it and you get a satisfied customer like Adam with great characters. Great characters to work with and play off and interpret. It's wonderful, but you take on a project and then you find the person can't write dialogue and you are in a world of hurt trying to hide the attributions, he said, she said, he said, she said, without...
It's not just a case of picking up the book and reading out into a microphone.
Oh gosh, no.
I mean, how many hours would you say go into every hour of audio that a listener would hear?
Minimum 5. It's essentially, you can... you crawl along in the process, and just recently I've been doing some books which have been on a very tight deadline, and it's taken 15-hour days to get there, to get them finished for about the last 3 weeks solid.
You're talking like this at the end.
Oh boy, the end of the book, yes. Just when you get to the climax, I can't say the words. Because he drove his sword into his throat, that kind of thing. It's gone.
And will you, for your own books, be recording the audio?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think you have to, don't you?
Yeah, then I'll, I can create all the characters, the voices I can actually do. As opposed to pretend.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I stopped doing it, because I realised that some of the characters that I'd put in, I didn't really like doing their voices, and I couldn't find the proper voice for them. One I actually killed off because I couldn't do a voice properly. And I thought, that's just daft. Well, let's get somebody else to do the audiobooks. What's I going to ask next? Something about your audio. But yes, I'm going to ask about your most interesting moment recording audiobooks, the thing that's given you the most trouble. I mean, I know you were saying you're doing a Roman series recently, and there's some interesting pronunciations there. Is there something you've come across that you just got completely stuck on, or has turned to hilarity? Please say it has.
Yeah, well, it has. I mean, this is the point where if you don't do your preparation, you get caught out. So you go halfway through a book and then you realise that the character you've been doing as a Cockney is a Scouser, and you've got to go back. That's just like the worst thing. But sometimes there are projects I've turned down, and I don't get masses of offers, but the one I was offered, which was, dare I say it, leprechaun eroticism.
Not my finest work.
There is a subgenre, who knew? And I was, it said in the blurb, what we're looking for, a narrator who can really perform and all that stuff. And it said, the central character is a leprechaun who has spent 10 years in Tel Aviv and 10 years in Brooklyn, but originally comes from Cork. The accent needs to reflect all three.
On the plus side, nobody would know if you did it wrong.
Well, yes.
I mean, what benchmark is there for that?
Well, look, and the section I had to do, it was about 3 pages, involved an intimate scene. And trying to do...
Some leprechaun loving.
Yeah, exactly. Grunting and whatever else you do in that sort of accent. I mean, at one point I'm going, oh, vey, and the next minute I'm going, yeah, forget about it. It's going to... To be sure, it's not really going to work, is it?
Get me some coffee.
Yeah, right.
Yes, okay. Well, I was going to say, I guess the troubles that you run into, other than the leprechaun porn, but in terms of forgetting how characters speak, what they're like, where they come from, there's similar challenges that you get when you're writing. Yeah. Sometimes you're writing a character, you forget things about them or what their job's meant to be, or they change names halfway through the book, which I've done. I've even killed characters off and then had them in the pub 10 chapters later. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is what editors are for.
Yes, well, it's about the central problem is continuity. It's the same if it was a full production drama. There's people making sure that the wristwatch is on the right wrist and all that sort of stuff, and that the Roman soldier is not wearing glasses. Which has happened in the past. In Ben-Hur, I think you can see somebody in a pair of glasses.
Is it like the bottle of water in Downton Abbey, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then there was the Starbucks cup on Game of Thrones that everyone's talking about. So, but yeah, in the audiobook terms, I was, sometimes you go back and you go, that doesn't even sound like me, let alone the character, and one of the things is, the temptation to fiddle with the equipment and change the microphone and halfway through a production, or change your studio environment or whatever it is. It has such a massive amplification when you're actually listening to it in such an intimate face, when you're on the headphones, and you suddenly realise what was sounding great towards the end of the book is suddenly nothing like what it sounds like at the start, where it's a little bit more sibilant, the treble's too high, you're shouting, there's all sorts of issues, and then you have to go back and do it again. And it's like writing, I suppose. What do they say? A book's a band and it's never finished. It's the same almost with audiobooks. You get to a point where, okay, you can improve it slightly, but for goodness sake, let's get it out there. There aren't any.
Speaking of which, I am being prodded from the side by somebody telling me our time is almost up. So I just want to say thank you very much to all of you here for joining us today. Give yourselves a big round of applause. I trust you'll all be listening to this when it goes out next Friday on the Partners in Crime podcast, which is available from all of the usual places and some unusual ones as well. Thank you very much to Morecambe and Vice for hosting us here at the wonderful Midland Hotel. Thank you to Tom, our man with the roving microphone, and for the wonderful story you made up as well. And of course, my thanks go to this man sitting beside me here for stepping in at the last minute so brilliantly, Mr. Adrian Hobart. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. I hope this time we're going to get the right theme tune, are we?
It's called End Theme.
End Theme. That might be the one. Do you want to give it a shot?
Presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Faish. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.